Hello, everyone. Hi, guys. So I would like to welcome you to this Thyroid Symptom Healing episode, which I am really, really excited about. And I'm also excited about the guest that I have today with me, who is none other than Tina Christoudias Spyrou, who I have the highest respect for. She's a registered dietitian and also an Autoimmune Protocol Certified Coach, and the author of the book, Tired of Feeling Tired. So shall we get to see her now? Welcome, Tina.
Hello. Hi, Christina. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to talk about a subject that I'm very passionate about. And it's great meeting you and meeting someone with a like-minded vision as mine. So I'm really excited to talk tonight for you.
And I'm really glad to have you here. I read your book, which I am a big fan of. I love the book. And I love the fact that you were being vulnerable and you were sharing your journey of how you discovered that you have an autoimmune disease, which we will discuss in this episode, and how you managed to heal it, which I think is fantastic. And you also provide a guide and also advice on how other people can do the same. So
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I guess my question would be like, would you like to share some of the story that you have in the book?
Sure. Basically, knowing what I know now in terms of my knowledge of, Hashimoto's thyroiditis and having hypothyroidism, which is, for people that don't know, having an underactive thyroid or a thyroid gland, which is located right about here in your throat, and it's a butterfly shape. And this thyroid is actually responsible for, I like to think of it as the conductor of an orchestra, because I have a background in music as well. So it basically interacts and conducts so many other things in the body. So your intestines, your other sex hormones, your adrenal glands, your brain, your thyroid has a communication with all these things within your body. So what had happened with me was that from 15 years old, without knowing, because I always thought it was just normal, I was always a little bit more tired than the rest of the kids. Like I noticed that other kids had the energy to do more, where I felt like I was pushing myself more. I had an issue with weight. I couldn't exactly shift weight, even though I was very active. I was a ballet dancer. I did a lot of active things. I tended to be on the higher end of the scale. I had a lot of, in my 20s, especially a lot of constipation and issues with my intestines, which we will talk about and see that, as Hippocrates, the father of medicine, said so many years ago, all disease begins in the gut, right? So I had those issues from a very young age. When I was around 30 years old, this is when I was diagnosed with hypothyroidism. I kind of diagnosed myself because I lived through my mother having the same condition. And I went and did the lab work by myself. And the lab technician was like, "Wow, how did you know you have a thyroid issue?" So I was diagnosed with hypothyroidism, but I had no idea that it was Hashimoto's. I didn't even know what Hashimoto's was. The real symptoms started to hit when I gave birth to my daughter about 7 years ago. I was depressed. I gained, even though during my pregnancy, I had only gained about 7 kilograms. I would say 5 to 6 months out of being pregnant, I had gained 10 kilograms without changing anything. My diet was the same. So I was depressed. I had severe constipation. My hair was falling out. I didn't have energy to do anything. When I approached doctors about the subject, they said, well, you know, your TSH or your thyroid stimulating hormone is normal. So all of these symptoms, you just need to lose weight and you need to exercise more. And I tell them, well, I can't move out of my bedroom. I can't move off of the couch. There's something a little bit going, more than that. So to make a long story short, my husband actually found me a book online, which kind of was the beginning of the journey for me. It's called Stop the Thyroid Madness. And through that book, we found an integrative doctor in England, and he started to tell me about diet and supplements. And that was kind of the aha moment for me. I was like, okay, I'm a registered dietitian. This is my job. And somehow I don't know about these things. So I started to kind of become a guinea pig on myself. And then ultimately did the research and wrote a book about how you can heal your symptoms of hypothyroidism. I would say that one of the biggest aha moments, or the thing that kind of changed for me, was that as registered dietitians, we're kind of taught, okay, we're taught how to read lab work, we're taught about how to read science, we're taught about, you know, in a clinical setting, in a hospital setting, about tube feeds and parenteral nutrition and all that, and all those things. But we're kind of taught how to keep, what's the right word here? To kind of just keep a disease state in maintenance mode. So if you have diabetes, how to maintain diabetes. If you have hypothyroidism, how to maintain hypothyroidism. If you have any other kind of chronic ailment, just how to maintain it. We weren't really taught about how nutrition can be one of the most important aspects of therapy to actually reverse a lot of the symptoms and to kind of bring you back to life. For me, that kind of happened when I cut out, the first thing I did was cut out gluten. Where, again, as clinical dietitians, we're taught that only if you have celiac disease, you know, do you cut out gluten. But when I cut out gluten, my brain fog lifted, I had more energy, the weight that I wanted to lose kind of just came off. So that was one of my many root causes, that kind of not being able to tolerate gluten. And to make a long story short, again, I think I've been talking for a while. Basically, the culmination of all of this is that over the past 2 years, I've been able to kind of give light or help people based on my own journey as a patient, and also my journey through my professional career. And it's really exciting because, like, the first session, you could have somebody crying, and you could be crying with them, and then you could see them a month later, and they're like, "Oh my God, you know, I feel so much better." And I empathize so much with that because, you know, it took me years to figure out how to navigate through this chronic disease, and you know, you still kind of figure out how to navigate through the chronic disease. But the cool thing is that I can answer those questions for people immediately, and they don't have to kind of, you know, do the guesswork when it comes to what's going on with them. So that's my story in a nutshell. Sorry if that was too long-winded.
No, absolutely not. And as a result of that, I believe you decided to do some work on autoimmune, how people can identify autoimmune disease.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, over the summer, I did a course with Mickey Trescott and Angela Alt. They are actually the owners of the website called autoimmunewellness.com. Mm-hmm. And they share 5 autoimmune diseases between them. And they actually created a course in which I became an Autoimmune Protocol Certified Coach. Mm-hmm. So within that, what you look at, like, this is where, like, I've been very excited to learn more because, again, as a registered dietitian, you're just kind of looking at things clinically, mm-hmm. whereas as a coach, you're looking at everything that the patient is. So you're looking at their psychological state, you're looking at the stressors in their lives, you're looking at the sleep quality, you're looking at what kind of support system they have, you're looking at their budget, you're looking at everything. So it's a lot more involved work than just, you know, prescribing a diet. You're really relating to the person and how you can help them to navigate and answer questions for themselves, because each person is so individualized and different. And as a coach, what I found is you have to be very sensitive to that. You can't just, as registered dietitians, you'd be like, okay, well, these are the rules. You have to do this, and you have to eat this much carbohydrate and this much protein and this much, follow the food guide pyramid, and that's the rules. But that's not how it works in real life. In real life, people have emotions. They go through traumatic experiences. They're happy, they're sad, they're very busy, they're under stress. So you have to consider all these factors. And I'm so happy that I got the opportunity to go through like a coaching program as well.
And I think that's why I think this is something that we were discussing when we first connected, is that this is one of the main reasons why a lot of doctors now are looking into functional medicine, is because they understand that it's not just the disease as a disease, but also there is other factors that affect it. And I'm really glad to see that there is a dietitian that also looks into people's life, because as a certified health coach, for example, I knew that how you are at home, your relationships at home affect your health, your sleep affects your health, your work affects your wealth. And now we're having more and more science backing that up. And so a person we're just not chopping a person and showing, okay, so this is their diet, but actually we're looking at their lifestyle in general, understanding their relationship, their work, their environment, to provide the best guidance. And I think this is why I think also it's very important for people to read your book, because you mention a lot of things. I think one of the most, because I knew this, but I think if someone reads your book, this will be one of the most shocking things that they will find. And that's that gluten affects everyone, not just the celiac.
Yeah, so this very smart scientist at Harvard, Dr. Alessandro Faisano, he actually found that gluten is actually responsible for regulating teeny tiny molecules or little particles that actually regulate, like I think if you can see on the screen, like let's say this is your gut, and you have little windows in your gut wall that allow for things like vitamin A to go through, vitamin D to go through, amino acids to go through, okay? And what gluten actually does is that it opens these windows to be bigger than they actually should be. So now all of a sudden you can get undigested gluten particles, because a gluten particle is not just one little particle, it's many proteins together, and so that's undigested, so that's going to go through. So you may have some bacteria that's okay to thrive inside the intestine, but not okay once it exits the bloodstream. So if you're getting this on a consistent basis, and especially with the SAD diet, which is called, the standard American diet, where you're getting all these white processed grains, and you're getting a lot of sugar and refined and processed foods. This process of opening these windows is happening all the time. I mean, if you look at a standard diet, like even here in Cyprus, people now, because they're busy, they'll wake up in the morning, they'll go to the bakery, they will have something made from white flour. Then they might have a sandwich for a snack. Then by the time they get to lunch, okay, they might have lentils, but they'll have more bread with it. So by the time they've gotten to lunch, not only have they been exposed to gluten so much, but they've also overloaded their body with sugar, because all that stuff becomes sugar in the body and less nutrition. They're not really getting nutrient density from that diet. So yeah, I mean, gluten does that to everybody, not just people with celiac disease, not just people with autoimmune disease, but everybody. Now, according to your genetic predisposition, that's how, over time, it depends if your body will express it or not. And also with things like gluten, a lot of the research that has been done specifically on celiac disease, because that's the one autoimmune disease that we know is specifically based on gluten. But specifically for autoimmune diseases too, we see that 60 to 70% of the population that has autoimmune disease has an intolerance to gluten. And we see that that is a very real trigger. And a lot of the time, from like so many of my patients, you know, I would say 8 out of 10 of them, when they cut out gluten, they see a massive difference in their symptoms and their health.
Absolutely. And if someone tells you, because a lot of people say, you know, like we didn't used to have gluten intolerance. Mm-hmm. And things like that. If someone comes to you and says, but you know, like my grandparents, they were eating gluten, and my mom and dad, and they were healthy. So what is your response?
My response is that, I mean, if you look at some of the dietary practices from back then to now, just looking at one simple thing like sugar, 200 years ago, the average person ate 20 teaspoons of sugar a year. Today, our children are eating 35 teaspoons of sugar a day. So we see one huge, so that has to do with all the processing that has come into play, okay? With things like gluten, a lot of things have happened over time that have changed. So let's say the wheat that was produced here in Cyprus back in 1940, you know, and, you know, the people would pick it and mill it and process it by themselves. In 1960, a genetically modified wheat was created called dwarf wheat that is higher in content in gluten and lower in nutrients. And what happened there is that it could be produced for a much lower cost and produced a lot more. All right, so you get a lot more feeding a lot more people. But the danger in that, of course, was that gluten was actually, you know, people were getting exposed to a lot of gluten and a lot of issues with that. Another thing to consider is that a lot of the ancient grains that used to be used that were wheat, like spelt, kamut, zeas bread, all of these are much lower in gluten and a lot higher in nutrient density. And there are some really small scale studies that suggest that if you use these grains in moderation, even though they have gluten, it doesn't really affect the autoimmune disease. But again, we need to see that on a much larger scale basis to make more certain recommendations on that. And so that's the wheat. The wheat, it in and of itself has been changed. Then you take the wheat and you process it into this refined white flour, which, by the way, is that color because of bleach. And then you're putting all that refined flour into the very common things that people eat today. A lot of bread, a lot of bagels in the States, a lot of pitas, a lot of pizza, you know, and this is a lot of cereals. You know, these has become our main source of food. So not only are you being exposed to gluten, you're being exposed to a lot of sugar because all those foods become sugar in your body and cause other issues.
Absolutely.
So of course, you know, my grandmother used to eat it, but I'm pretty sure the grandmother didn't have pizza and, you know, white tortillas and bagels and all these kinds of foods in the past, like the way we are exposed to it now. So it's the type of gluten, the type of source of gluten, and also the amount of exposure we're having to the processing of that flour.
Absolutely. And gluten and sugar are super addictive, and also a lot of I can hear my voice for some reason. And they're super addictive. And not only that, but also a lot of companies now, they're trying to find the bliss point, which is the point of where the combination of sugar and salt becomes addictive. And so you eat something that is purely chemical. And also it's highly addictive because it ignites your reward hormones, your happy hormones, because they know, they've done the science, they hired the scientists to find those points in you, those things in the brain in you.
Sure, because those bliss points also means higher profit for them, because you just keep going back for more, like an addict.
Exactly.
So, unfortunately, there's profit to be thought about instead of the welfare of human beings. So, but that's why, you know, you do what you do and I do what I do, to bring education to people and to make people realize these things, because when you realize these things, you can vote with your wallet.
Exactly.
So, vote for change with your wallet. You can say, well, I'm not going to buy those refined things. I'm not going to buy all the stuff that makes me sick. I'm going to support local farmers, and I'm going to support people that care about what kind of feed they're giving to their animals. And I'm going to support the people that can give me real food. Because ultimately, if we can do that as a community, not only in Cyprus, but worldwide, ultimately, you can create a sustainable way of living and eat real food without the added cost.
Absolutely. And that's always something that I stress, even in the workshops that I do, is the power that we have is in the money. So all this incorporation, they're going to where the profit is, and they see that a lot of people consume refined products. Then they say, okay, we need to produce more of it because people buy it and they like it. So they just go where the money is. So if you suddenly show, you know what, this is not what I want, this is not what I want to consume, I want something else, then they will try and produce that something else for you because that's a profit for them.
Exactly. And you can see that now with all the gluten-free products.
Exactly.
So a lot of people in Cyprus say to me, you know, isn't this gluten-free a fad? And I'm like, well, the food industry will always take something that's, you know, kind of getting popular and start creating stuff with it. But it doesn't mean that you should be going and eating all this gluten-free food, because it's again processed and it's again, you know, has all this additives in it. So it doesn't really help you too much. One thing I can say about making people go gluten-free is that it really puts them in the process in terms of helping themselves to choose better foods. Because, for example, 9 out of 10 of my patients come and say, I have cheese and toast for breakfast. Now, all of a sudden, I took the cheese and toast away. And they're like, maybe I can have some eggs and some avocados and maybe stick some vegetables in there. And all of a sudden, you're starting to think about real food instead of the convenient way to eat food or fake food.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. Would you also, for those that want to see if they do have an autoimmune disease, is there a way that they can understand that I might have an issue? Maybe I should go and speak to my doctor?
I mean, you know, for thyroid disease and all autoimmune diseases in general, we're talking about that the body is in a state of panic and kind of fighting itself. So any or all of these could be happening. So you could be depressed, you could be overly anxious, you could be not dealing with stress in the way you're supposed to be dealing with stress. So even the slightest thing you can have a reaction like, oh my God, I can't deal with this right now, and you have a panic attack. You can also have things like chronic fatigue, not having enough energy throughout the day, having an energy drop around 3 p.m., waking up feeling tired. In terms of thyroid disease, you know, having cold extremities, cold hands, cold feet. In fact, a do-it-yourself way to kind of check if you might have a thyroid problem is to take your morning temperature every morning. And if it's a little bit, even just a little bit lower, you know, that's kind of an indication that you might have a thyroid problem going on, because one of the functions of the thyroid is to regulate temperature. Other things more severe could be like, you know, somebody that has one autoimmune disease can have several. You have a bigger chance of having more than one autoimmune disease together. So someone with thyroid disease could also have things like fibromyalgia, a lot of aches and pains throughout the body, without doing significant amount of exercise or movement. You could have hair loss. That was one of the big ones for me. Like I would go like this, and my once long, nice hair was just like, oh my God, what's happening?
Oh no.
So you know, that's another issue that a lot of thyroid patients have. And one of the biggest things I would say that's a huge trigger, because as we said earlier, all disease begins in the gut. is to really pay attention to your digestive tract and how you're processing your food. One disgusting thing that you can check out, I mean, I'm going to say poop on the air, but looking at your poop is a big indication of how your digestive tract is. So, for example, if your poop is in like little hard balls, that means we have a lot of constipation going on. If you see undigested food in your poop, that could mean that you do not have enough stomach acid. And if you do not have enough stomach acid, you do not produce enough enzymes to break down your food, and that food kind of stays in the intestine and gets stuck there, and raises other issues like small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, which I won't get too technical, but this overgrowth of bad bacteria in the intestines, which will cause things like spasms in the intestine and bloating and discomfort and flatulence and burping a lot. So all these kinds of any kind of digestive issues that somebody has, it's a trigger to someone to say, I better go and get this checked out because it could lead to something later. I could say me as the biggest example. I've had issues with constipation from 14, 15 years old, and I never thought anything of it. I just thought, okay, this is me. But there is a problem there. So, working with people like yourself, with integrative nutritionists, looking at the root cause of what the digestive problems are there and giving solutions for that, I would say is one of the biggest areas to healing. And it's what makes our job so important, because we're the people that actually educate people. How do we buy our food? How do we cook our food? What kinds of food should we include? What kind of when should we eat our food? When do we having mindful eating practices? Because if you're not mindful about when you're eating and you're just eating on the go, the digestive process again is interrupted. Getting enough rest, getting enough downtime, navigating stress. We're supposed to have a good amount of stress during the day. I mean, if you think about how animals are when they go on the hunt for some food, that's stress, right? But then you also see them, like a lion, for example, you also see a lion just lazing around. That's the rest period. I think that's one big difference that us humans really take for granted. We're just go all the time. And a lot of us are not sleeping well. We're not getting enough sleep. We're not taking enough time to do the things that give us pleasure, that make us feel good. We're part of a rat race. Everybody, unfortunately, is a lot more about money than about their health and about making choices that will enhance their lives rather than just chasing after that magic money, We've become dependent on pills instead of looking at the root cause of what's going on. And I'm not trying to undermine medicine, because there are many cases where medicine is needed to help somebody. Like, for example, a lot of people with thyroid disease, when it comes to medicine, they do need a good amount of they might need T4 medication, they might need T4 and T3 medication, and they need a doctor or a functional medicine practitioner to optimize that dosage for them so that they can feel their best. So I'm not knocking it, but I am saying that why not have a multifactorial approach? Why not have a lot of people on board, to have open discussions with doctors, with nutritionists, with nurses, with acupuncturists, with naturopaths, because all these people, they have so much knowledge. And imagine that, coming together in a culmination of, how much better we can make healthcare for people if all these people work together towards the common goal of helping people instead of other things. So I have a lot to say about that, but that could be a whole other book in itself. So.
Yeah, absolutely. What I just wanted to pick out, and I want to mention this because it was one of the truest thing I've heard recently, is that technology has evolved like this suddenly, massively, and it's still evolving. But as humans, we haven't caught up to it. Mm-hmm. And we're just trying to catch up with it by harming our health. So we're harming our health. So we live in times where we don't know how to treat the technology, and the technology is constantly evolving, and we're not. Our bodies hasn't changed in the last, since we've been, our body works the same as it was before, like 2,000 years ago, or when we were first created. It still works the same. So we haven't evolved much. We still need, and it's exactly what you said, we still need rest. Our body needs rest. And that's why a lot of people get disease, because it's their body's sign to say, stop. I had enough. Like, this is too much.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, exactly. I mean, every living organism, even from the beginning of time, has learned to live with the cycles of the sun, right? So those light signals, those dark signals, you know, that's ingrained in us. And I mean, even what we're doing right now, talking to a screen, you know, that's affecting our circadian rhythms, or our natural biological rhythms that kind of give signals to our hormones. Okay, it's bedtime, it's rest. Instead, it's giving a signal to cortisol, which is a stress hormone, to like, okay, wake up, which is okay when it's morning time, but when it's nighttime, it's not okay. And all those things, you know, culminate after a long time of not sleeping well and not taking care of your health in disease. And this is where people need to realize that they have a huge part in their health and their well-being. I mean, diet, sleep, stress management, exercise. We do these things. No doctor prescribes this. So it's in our hands to kind of make sure that we're getting the right information to change these things in our lives, so we can better ourselves and our health.
Amazing. I think we came to the end of the interview, Tina. Is there one thing that you would advise, or that you would give to the audience, that they could do today to take control of their health?
I think the biggest thing that we could do as a first step is to kind of realize that all of us, every single individual, is on our own journey. And our own journey emotionally, our own journey spiritually, our own journey to healing something. And I think what I would do is, instead of going to immediately the solutions, to kind of take stock and see what where the problems actually lie. So if it's you're not sleeping well, if it's, you know, you don't have energy, write all these things down, keep a journal, kind of start becoming more aware of yourself, because our bodies talk to us. Our bodies give us information all the time. We just ignore it. So take stock of what you're doing. And then I would say to ask for help. Ask for help from professionals that you resonate with on a different level, so that you are actually getting the right support and the right help that you're getting, either whether it's from your doctor, whether it's from your nutritionist, whether it's from another healthcare provider, doesn't matter. Ask for help. Don't be afraid. I think a lot of women too, we kind of, you know, we can do everything by ourselves. Like maybe we can, but we're not in a vacuum. We need help. We need other human beings to help us. So the first thing is to take stock of what we're doing. The second thing is to ask for help. And in terms of diet, if anything, even if you can't go gluten-free from today, I would just start with one thing that you do habitually every day that maybe is not so good. Like, for example, I eat 3 chocolate bars a day. And say, instead of those chocolate bars, maybe I'll try like an avocado chocolate mousse, or maybe I'll try anything else that is, you know, maybe a fruit salad, something different that will give you nutrient density. And so by making those small, sustainable changes, you can get towards eating a more real food-based diet. And then eventually making a decision to go gluten and dairy and sugar-free. And, you know, you kind of ease into it instead of just jumping into it. But of course, again, that depends on your character. So if you're a character that does better with, jumping into something immediately, going cold turkey on it, or if you're a character that really does need to be eased into it. So again, taking stock, knowing your character, knowing how you operate, is going to be fundamentally the biggest thing that gives you success or not so much success in your health journey.
And we need to be, and that's a really good point. I think that's a really good advice, because I'm based on my character. I never was good at being radical with things. I needed to be slowly eased into it. And it's like exercise. It's you start, for example, when I first started running, my first time it was walking. My second time it was running for a minute and then walking. And slowly, I could then run a marathon. It's the same thing. So you just start slowly. Start, for example, decreasing the volume maybe of the gluten that you eat or the volume of sugar that you eat. And then slowly, by replacing it with something else, it will be much easier for some people to put it completely out of their life. For some others, you're right. It's much easier to say, you know what, that's it. I'm not touching it, and they can keep it up.
Right. It depends. It depends on the character. It really depends on the person and what they're ready to change and where they are in their journey. And this is the biggest thing. Do not compare yourself to anybody. Everybody's different. You know, like what. I think we said this before when we spoke earlier, that your medicine in terms of food could be my poison or vice versa. Yeah. So, you know, it really is about finding out what works for you. There's no one be all and end all solution for everybody. And being kind to yourself, you know, don't be so hard on yourself. Being kind to yourself, taking the time, resting, and enjoying the ride.
Thank you, Tim. I think this was actually a very good point. Your food is another person's poison, and also rest and be kind to yourself. Because if we're kind to ourselves, it's easier actually to keep up. But if we're not kind, if we're harsh to ourselves, then it's easier for us to then eat the pizza, eat the chips, and go again to the old habits. That's a really good point. Really good. Well said, Tina.
Oh, thank you.
You are absolutely. Tina, thank you so much. It was such a pleasure to have you here.
Oh, the pleasure was all mine. It was awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you too. Thank you. And like you guys need to watch the space, because this woman is actually creating something amazing that we will be able to share at some point. But do watch the space. Follow this woman. She's incredible. Thank you very much. I'm so grateful that I'm so grateful that you joined this discussion, and all the best.
All right. Thank you so much, Christina. Take care. Bye-bye.